सर सुरू करता येईल, काय प्रॉब्लेम नाही.
बाहेर वाढव.
हाँ सर, कैन आई स्टार्ट सर?
यस यस मैडम. ये क्या होगा इन्हें?
गुड मॉर्निंग. हेलो सर.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Shall
Hello,
we
can you
start?
hear me? Yeah. Please go ahead.
देखो नहीं.
ये ज्वाइन करें आपने मीटिंग. ये आपकी मीटिंग है.
स्टार्ट करा. ओके, काय प्रॉब्लेम नाही.
Okay, sir. Good morning and welcome to all the dignitaries and resource persons and participant delegates in one-day international e-conference on post-COVID-19 changes in academic field, merits and demerits, which is jointly organized by IQACs of Arts and Science College, Shivaji Nagar, Gadhi and Saraswati Mahavidyalaya, Caij. On the eve of National Education Day, 133rd birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, the first education minister of India. This e-conference organized under the guidance of our chief patron, Honorable Sri Amar Singh Ji Pandit, President JBSP Mandal, Gevrai District, Bid, and Honorable Sri Ashok Rao Ji Patil, President Mauli Vidyapit, Caij. I would like to welcome Dr. Amit Rahul sir, Associate Professor, Department of English, University of Oklahoma, USA. Secondly, I would like to warm welcome to resource persons of today's e-conference, Dr. Mustajib Khan sir, Professor, Department of English, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University, Aurangabad, Maharashtra. Our second resource person, Dr. Nawaz Jamal sir, Professor, Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia, Central University, New Delhi, India. And I would like to welcome Principal Dr. Vasant Sanup sir, President of today's event. Welcome to our organizing secretary of today's e-conference, Principal Dr. V.K. Kadam sir, Arts and Science College, Gadhi. Other organizer secretary of today's event, Principal Dr. Patil GB sir, Saraswati Mahavidyalaya, Caij. May I invite Principal Dr. V.K. Kadam sir to inaugurate this e-conference formally on post-COVID-19 changes in academic field, merits and demerits. Principal Dr. Kadam sir.
Good morning to all, especially good evening to Dr. Amit Rahul Baishe. At the outset, I wish you all a very happy National Education Day. As we know, today is the National Education Day. And on this, our first Education Minister of India, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, 133rd birth anniversary. Jai Bhavani Shiksham Prasar Shivaji Nagar, Gadhi, District, Bid, and Saraswati Mahavidyalaya, Caij, District, Bid, have jointly organized on one day international e-conference on post-COVID-19 changes in academic field, merits and demerits. So I hereby welcome to all of you in this one-day international e-conference. Today, Chairperson, Principal Dr. Sanup sir, Balbir Mahavidyalaya, Bid, in Maharashtra. Principal Dr. Patil, Saraswati Mahavidyalaya Kaij, District Bid in Maharashtra. Today's keynote speaker, Dr. Amit Rahul Vaishya, USA. Today we have two eminent research persons. Among the one is the Professor Mustajib Khan, professor in Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Aurangabad, in Maharashtra. Then our next speaker, Dr. Naved Jamal, professor in New Delhi in organizing team of this international e-conference, and my dear friends, I will come you all. Friends, we know that the main intention behind organizing this conference is that to focus on the changes occur on in our education system, its merits and demerits in post-COVID-19 system. We all are very well aware about the change in education system. Since 2 years, we have been experiencing online education, merits and demerits of this online education. First of uh, all will focus on some of the merits. One, online class bring education right to your home. Second, online class offers flexibility. Third, this gives knowledge of modern tools and technologies. Fourth, interaction of instructor and students. 5, online learning is effectively learning. There are some demerits of these online classes. First, students are not involved completely. Second, poor economically condition of students so that they cannot purchase advanced tools and technology. Third, students has to face poor network issues. Fourth, illiteracy about how to use different online apps. Fifth, no effect to face interaction. 6, intention requirement for self discipline. These are some of advantages and disadvantages of this online teaching learning process. I listed some of them hereby on this particular topic. We will listen scholarly guidelines of today's event speaker. So we are very eager to listen them. I hereby declare that this program is inaugurated. I wish you very good luck for the success of this international e-conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Dr. Kadam, sir, for inaugurating today's e-conference formally and guiding us about merits and demerits of online teaching learning process due to COVID-19. After this, I would like to request Dr. Siddiqui sir to introduce of chief guests and resource persons of today's e-conference. Dr. Siddiqui sir.
Am I audible now? Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Respected dignitaries and online audience, today is National Education Day.
सर सिद्दीकी सर आपके बाजू में कोई बैठा है ना, उनको वहां से आप दूर रखो, इको मार रहा है.
Today is National Education Day. Every year, India celebrates National Education Day on November 11 to commemorate the birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, the first Union Education Minister of India, a freedom fighter, a scholar, and eminent educationalist. Maulana Azad was a key architect of independent India who was responsible for setting up apex education bodies like AICTE, UGC. On National Education Day, India remembers Maulana Azad's contribution to nation building. The central government, with a resolution on September 11, 2008, declared November 11 as National Education Day. The first National Education Day celebrations were inaugurated by then President of India, Pratibha Patil, on 11 November 2008 at Vigyan Bhavan, New Delhi. According to the historian, Maulana Azad laid the base of higher education and for technological and scientific research and education that was instrument in the industrialization and the recent emergence of knowledge-based industries. The first Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Kharagpur, was established by Maulana Azad. Maulana Azad once said that schools are laboratories that produce future citizens of the country. In his address to the first meeting of the Central Advisory Board of Education, Maulana said, the primary aim of any system is to create balanced mind which cannot be misled. Apart from IIT Kharagpur, University Grant Commission, All India Council for Technical Education, Maulana Azad was also responsible for setting up in Indian Council for Cultural Relations, that is ICCR, Sahitya Academy, Lalit Kala Academy, Sangeet Natak Academy, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, that is CSIR. So he has important role in founding major educational institutions in India. Maulana Azad was posthumously awarded Bharat Ratna, the highest civilian award, in 1992. He was in Nehru's cabinet till 2nd February 1958. He died on 22nd February 1958. This was a great background of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, to commemorate which we are celebrating his birthday as National Education Day. Respected audience, today's topic for e-conference is post-COVID changes in the academic field, merits and demerits. We have learned scholars to focus on the theme. I would like to give a short introduction of them. First of all, we have keynote address of Dr. Amit Rahul Vaishya sir. Honorable sir is an associate professor in the Department of English at the University of Oklahoma, United States of America. His first monograph, Contemporary Literature from Northeast India, Death Worlds, Terror and Survival, was published by Routledge in 2018. He was also the co-editor of 3 collections, Northeast India, A Place of Relations, co-editor Yasmin Saikia, published by Cambridge University Press in 2017. Again, Post-Colonial Animalities, co-editor Swadip Sinha, published by Routledge in 2019. And a special issue of the journal Post-Colonial Studies titled Planetary Solidarities, Post-Colonial Theory, the Anthropocene and the Non-Human. The co-editor is Priya Kumar, published in 2021. He is currently co-editing a special issue titled Insights Outsides, Anglophone Literatures from Northeast India for South Asian Review with Rakhi Kalita Moral, and also writing his second monograph on species extinction, deep time and multi-species, cohabitation in contemporary post-colonial literature. Vaishya translates short stories and novels from Assamese to English. His translation of Devendranath Acharya's Assamese novel, Jangam, The Moment, the Vitasta Press, on the forgotten long march of Indians from Burma during World War II, was released in 2018. So basically our sir is from Assam and he got primary education in Assam, and later on he joined Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, and after which he got American PhD degree. So this is our great opportunity to hear him. I would like to appeal all of you to listen him carefully. Ladies and gentlemen, we have second resource person, Dr. Mustajib Khan. He is a professor of English in Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, and also Board of Students Development in the same university. He got his PhD from Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Aurangabad. His topic was Badal Sarkar, Vijay Tendulkar, and Mahesh Dattani, a theatrical discourse. He has a specialization in Indian writing in English, drama, theatre, and film studies. He completed a major research project of the University Grand Commission, New Delhi, titled Toward the Political Theatre, a thematic study of Utpadal, Safdar Hashmi, and G.P. Deshpande. He got PhD supervision for 4 students and 14 students for MPhil degree. He got 28 research papers published in national and international journals. He also presented 60 research papers in national and international seminars and conferences. He also wrote 3 plays and 2 one-act plays in Marathi language. So he has many translation work also, like Utpal Das play Surya Ishkar in Marathi. He won the Best Light Designing Awards 5 times, designed by Government of Maharashtra. He is an executive member of Indian Society for Theatre Research, the Association for the Study of Literature and Environment, New Delhi. He has major role in designing curriculum regarding the syllabus of film and literature, drama, and Indian writing in English. He is member of board of editors for various journals. So he is a great scholar and author also. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a great opportunity to hear such a scholar person from Marathwada University. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another resource person, Dr. Naveed Jamal. He is a professor, Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. So He got his MA in political science in 1995 from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He got MPhil in political science in 1998 in Center for Political Studies, CPS, Jawaharlal Nehru University, School of Social Sciences. In 1998, he got his PhD degree from K.R. Narayanan Center for Dalit and Minority Studies, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. His title of the thesis was Human Rights and Minority Rights, an Interface in Indian Experiments. He got international award also. He was awarded the Indo-France Visitorships in France starting from June 2014 for a month in the name of Indo-French Program for Cooperation in Social Science for carrying on research work. So he has won the international award also in the academic field. He has articles in books that is very long list. I have no time to include all the names of books that he has article in that book. He also published newspaper editorials, research project, and he is PhD supervisor also. And he, under his supervision, he has completed. He has performed his supervising work for the PhD students, for many students. That is, the digit shows he has supervised 12 students up to now. So he is right now students advisor of the Department of Political Science and BA program Faculty of Social Sciences. Faculty presently he is students advisor Department of Political Science since August 2019. So we have a great privilege to hear such a scholarly persons on the account of such e-conference that we are going to organize. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to appeal all of you to listen all the persons carefully, and I would like to thank the organizers, and I would like to appeal to the carry the process of this e-conference to the anchor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqui sir, for giving detailed introduction of today's e-conferences, scholarly chief guests, and resource persons. Honorable dignitaries and respected delegates, as we know the impact of COVID-19 on the whole world, how our lives have been changed academically and socially. Hereby, I would like to invite Dr. Amit Rahul sir to deliver keynote address on post-COVID-19 changes in academic field merits and demerits. Dr. Amit Rahul sir.
You hear me? Can all of
Yes,
you hear me now? Yes. Okay. I'll have to share my screen at some point, right? So, because I'd like to show you a couple of quotations from things that I'm reading out and also a clip on YouTube. But first of all, let me begin by thanking Professor Siddiqui for inviting me. This is indeed a great honor. And I would also say that it's actually a very good day to speak, being the birthday, the 133rd birth anniversary of Dr. Maulana Azad. Of course, has been a source of inspiration for all of us. So what I'm going to do today is to talk a little bit about a certain type of pattern which is common in plague narratives, not just COVID, but plague narratives. And this is something that comes from my own teaching here at the University of Oklahoma. And what I'd like to do, of course, is to try to connect what I'm saying here from literature and cinema to things which happened at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. I mean, while, for instance, I won't be able to speak much about the challenges that students, for instance, face in India on COVID, what I would probably like to outline is a certain narrative pattern, right? So the title of my talk for today is, can I share my screen, please? Okay, can you see what the screen? Yep, it's the title of my talk today is, It Mattered Not From Whence It Came, but it all agreed it was come, plague narratives as narratives of media and foreignness. And the first part of this title actually comes from a very famous plague novel, and that's by Daniel Defoe. The novel is titled The Journal of the Plague Year. So I'm going to read out certain sections, and then I'll also show you certain clips from movies, especially this movie called World War Z. Okay. This talk emerges out of pedagogical strategies deployed in classes that I teach at the undergraduate level at the University of Oklahoma. I teach classes both on plague narratives and also on the popular figure of the zombie. And while one genealogy of zombies can be traced back to the Caribbean folklore surrounding the figure itself, the other major trajectory emerges from narratives of the plague. Inspired by Stephanie Bullock and Wiley Lenz's trans-historical approach to plague narratives, this talk adopts a minimalist approach to compare the opening sequences of Daniel Defoe's novel, A Journal of the Plague Year, with the big-budget Hollywood film, World War Z, which came out in 2009. I juxtapose these sequences together in my classes to illustrate how the communicability of text becomes inseparable from the communicability of plagues. This approach, this paper rather, I adopt a minimalist reading strategy, focusing only on the opening sequences to compare transhistorical continuities inhering in these narratives from the eras of early and late capitalism. Besides the affinities between the communicability of plagues and the communicability of text and media, I consider how plagues are imagined as emerging from elsewhere. Furthermore, plagues are associated with the figure of the foreigner, the outsider, or the other. I begin with an analysis of an opening passage from A Journal of the Plague Year. Then I have a brief intermediate section that functions as a threshold, looking ahead from Defoe's text to later plague and apocalyptic narratives. This intermediary phase also broaches the representation of media and infection in zombie films predating World War Z. I then turn to an analysis of the opening sequences of World War Z to consider how it distills the themes of otherness, the connections between media and actual contagions, and how the media forms through which information spreads impact the velocities of affects like panic, right? So I have three sections in my talk. The first section, I'll talk about Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year. In the intermediate section, I'll talk a little bit about Albert Camus' The Plague and also about movies predating World War Z, and then I'll end with World War Z. So let me begin with the first section of Journal of the Plague Year, right? And this is the opening section of the novel. And I'm going to read this out. You can read it along with me. It was about the beginning of September 1664 that I, among the rest of my neighbors, heard in ordinary discourse that the plague had returned again in Holland, for it had been very violent there, and particularly in Amsterdam and Rotterdam, in the year 1663, whither they say it was brought, some said from Italy, others from the Levant, among some goods which were brought home by their Turkey fleet. Others said it was brought from Candia, others from Cyprus. And here's the title of my talk. It mattered not from whence it came, but all agreed it was come to Holland again. We had no such thing as printed newspapers in those days to spread rumors and reports of things, and to improve them by the invention of men, as I have lived to have practiced since. But such things as these were gathered from the letters of merchants and others who corresponded abroad, and from them was handed about by word of mouth only, so that things did not spread instantly over the whole nation as they do now. Hence it was that the rumor died off again, and people began to forget it as a thing we were very little concerned in, and that we hoped were not true, till the latter end of November or the beginning of December 1664, when two men said to be Frenchmen died of the plague in Longacre, or rather at the upper end of Drury Lane. Now, from this segment that I read out from Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year, the opening couple of paragraphs, I tease out three major threads that kind of echo in later texts. First, as Susan Sontag writes, there is a link between imagining disease and imagining foreignness. Notice, for instance, how in this particular passage, the plague always arises from elsewhere, Turkey, Amsterdam and Rotterdam, and so on. So it always emerges from elsewhere. Think also about the beginning of the coronavirus epidemic, right? It always emerges from elsewhere, Wuhan district in China, and so on and so forth. That's the first idea that we have about the plague. It always emerges from elsewhere, right? Susan Sontag goes on to say that part of the centuries-old conception of Europe as a privileged cultural entity is that it was a place which is colonized by lethal diseases coming from elsewhere. Europe is assumed by rights to be free of disease, and Europeans have been astoundingly callous about the far more devastating extent to which they, as invaders and as colonists, have introduced the diseases to the exotic primitive world, right? Now, HF, or the central character of Journal of the Plague Year, Defoe's narrator, speculates about the origins of the plague that conflate the pandemic with foreignness. The source seems to be the hot zones, either in the Mediterranean or in Asia. HF speculations also gesture towards the connection between the mobility of the plague and the mobility of goods and people in this period of early capitalism. As Sontag writes, trading ports like Amsterdam and Rotterdam were the transit points of the plague, brought by seamen and then transported by soldiers and merchants. Waterways function as openings that introduce the illness into the closed body of the nation via the circulation of capital. Ships are the carriers of the virus and remain so, at least up to the predominance of automobiles and air travel. To give you another example, if you notice, for instance, famous novels like Dracula by Bram Stoker, the plague again arrives by ship. So the ship becomes the conduit point, if you think about it, both for the trading of goods as well as the trading of the virus itself, right? Now, the second paragraph from Defoe's passage introduces three related but distinct trajectories that circulate later narratives of the plagues as well. The first is about a connection between media and contagion. The second is about the speed of transmission. And the third is an almost fleeting connection instituted between rumor and panic. Discussing the similarity between actual and media plagues, now often encapsulated by the term virality. Think about viral videos, for instance. Why do we use the word viral with videos? Again, it's an etymology that comes again from plagues. The media scholar Sean Cubitt delves into etymology and writes, there is a disturbing etymological puzzle underlying contagion. Contagion appears to be a late 14th century coinage, appearing in the wake of the Black Death in medieval French and English, from the Latin roots con, meaning with, and tangere, or the active verb to touch. The puzzle comes from another word we associate at least closely with electronic media, or contact. Here the root words are the same, with the only exception that contact comes from the passive form tactum, to be touched. Oddly, most people feel positive connotations about contact, but negative connotations from contagion. So the idea, of course, is that both of these words, contact and contagion, come from the same root in Latin, right? The paradox here lies in the fact that what is agential is viewed negatively and what is passive is viewed positively. Underlying this difference in connotation, though, is a similarity between the speed of transfer through the metaphor of touch. Whether to touch or be touched, both plagues and electronic media are characterized by the rapidity of transfer and the speed with which they move from one bodily interface to another. Right? This is, of course, a major point, which I keep on repeating in my classes, that when you talk about actual plagues and when you talk about media plagues, they're pretty much comparable. Defoe was, of course, writing during the consolidation of the era of print capitalism and not of electronic media. But then again, he anticipates later theses about speed, whether it is Karl Marx's thesis in Capital about capital annihilating space with time, or Benedict Anderson's musings about simultaneity, or the French technocritic Paul Virilio's connections between speed and politics. Note the connection that HF draws between newspapers and rumor in this passage that I read out, and the instant spread of information across the whole nation in the era of print capitalism, and compare it with this passage, this famous passage from Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities, where he describes newspapers as one-day bestsellers. The obsolescence of the newspaper on the morrow of its printing creates this extraordinary mass ceremony, almost precisely simultaneous consumption or imagining of the newspaper as fiction. We know that particular morning and evening editions will overwhelmingly be consumed between this hour and that. The significance of this mass ceremony, Hegel observed that newspapers serve modern man as a substitute for morning prayers, is paradoxical. It is performed in silent privacy, yet each communicant is well aware that the ceremony he performs is being replicated simultaneously by thousands or millions of others whose existence he is confident, yet of whose identity he has not the slightest notion. Furthermore, this ceremony is incessantly repeated at daily or half-hour intervals throughout the calendar. What more vivid figure for the secular, historically clocked, imagined community can be envisioned? At the same time, or simultaneously, the newspaper reader, observing exact replicas of his own paper being consumed by his subway, barbershop, or residential neighbors, is continually reassured that the imagined world is visibly rooted in everyday life. I emphasize words like simultaneously and at the same time, because implicit in them are theses about the speed of transfer. Via simultaneity, newspapers make information viral at a velocity. Newspapers make information viral at a velocity which is virtually unimaginable in forms of face-to-face contact. In doing so, they also precipitate the velocity with which rumors and one of its associated emotional states, panic, spreads across the nation's geo-body. H.F.'s distinction between the before of the era of newspapers and the print capitalism saturated now is, however, misread by these two critics that I talked about earlier, Stephanie Bullock and Wiley Lenz. They write, instead, H.F. explains prior to the rise of newspapers, such things were handed about by word of mouth only, a process that allowed such rumors to gradually die off. This misreading occurs because they stop at the segment which says the rumor died off again in Defoe's paragraph, and do not consider what rumor connotes as a speech act and how it facilitates not only the spread of panic, but a rate and velocity with which it spreads like a contagion. Subaltern studies scholar Gyanendra Pandey says that rumors, speech acts ostensibly without signature. What he means by this is that when we say rumor, we can never quite assign an author to the rumor, so to speak, in some sense. He writes, rumor moves in a direction almost contrary to that of testimony, generalizing, exalting to extraordinary, even miraculous status, and employing the sweeping terms of deluge and just deserts. In rumor, language is transformed from a mode of possible communication to a particular kind of imperative condition, communicable, infectious, possible, and almost necessary to pass on. Pandey draws upon the registers of what Anjali Raza calls a disease poetics to describe the modality of rumor as a speech act. Rumor sort of renders natural the political dimensions of speech. Think about words like deluge, and is also figured via the lexicon of contagion. Think about the word infectious here. Now, one of the affects or one of the emotional states associated with the spread of rumor is panic. Again, let me make a detour via the origins of words or etymology. In her meditation on the physics of terror, the Italian philosopher Adriana Cavallero says that panic derives from the Greek panikos, which leads us back to the power so connected to the god Pan. Cavallero writes, panic fear or panic terror was what the ancients called the feeling of total fear, sudden and unexplainable, caused by the presence of the god. Although for the ancients as well as for the modern psychological lexicon, panic is primarily an individual experience. It is easy to see why the term lends itself to designating those collective experiences in which terrorized masses flee. The contiguity of bodies makes masses especially susceptible to the contagion of terror, transmitting and heightening its effects. In Defoe's novel, HF is not saying that rumors die off. Instead, through a comparison with the before of face-to-face communication and the now of newspapers, he's emphasizing the speed of transfer. Rumors lie dormant like a virus and can be reactivated like zombies. However, the spread of the contagion of rumor in conditions of face-to-face communication occurs slowly and successively. It spreads from the two infectious apertures in the body, the mouth to the ear. Defoe depicts this slow spread of panic in the first part of the novel by the gradual rise in the number of deaths as the infection spreads parish by parish. Newspapers accelerates the spread of rumor and panic through space-time compression. For the public that participates in the ritual of daily newspaper reading, this experience is not successive, but simultaneous. As a witness to both the before and the now, HF's comparison is a meditation of speed, which, as Aldous Huxley later said, is the only new pleasure invented by modernity. While Huxley is talking about the pleasures of the automobile, I refer to the other aspect of this very kind of mutable connotation of speed in the accelerating age of mechanical reproduction, its capacity to spread panic and anxiety like a virus. Defoe, thus, is already putting his finger on that experience, which has increasingly become so familiar for us now. Let me move to my second section, which is the intermediary section. I use this section as a way to look forward to a lineage of literatures on the plague that follow a journal of the plague year, and backwards from the movie World War Z to trace a small history of media as captured in the zombie film. Let us first consider the plague trope of the plague as a phenomenon that is brought about by the foreigner. The previous US President Donald Trump's notoriously racist characterization of COVID as Kung Flu follows a long history of the racialization of Asian Americans in the US. However, other locations like the Islamic East, South Asia, and Latin America are also substitutable in the disease poetics in the Euro-American kind of situation. Consider, for instance, the author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's other novel, The Last Man, with which its deployment of the last man trope anticipates the figuration of the lone witness of zombie apocalypses in later films like 28 Days Later. In Shelley's The Last Man, the world-destroying plague originates in Constantinople as a curse from Allah. In this period of high Orientalism that shapes romantics like Byron and Mary Shelley, the novel, as Anjali Raza Kolb says, makes a bid for infectiousness and contagion, originating in the Muslim East as primary motors of a universal history. Anjali Raza Kolb's magisterial epidemic empire institutes strong connections between Western discourses on terrorism and discourses on contagion and its associated disease poetics that are the enduring legacies of colonialism. One text she considers is Albert Camus' The Plague, which, despite being a novel set in Algeria, isn't always read as a novel about Algeria. The plague departs from the usual script about plagues as arising from elsewhere. Here, the plague emerges from within Oran. However, in crucial ways, it also follows the disease poetics evidence in a journal that triangulates otherness, media, and speed, like I did earlier. Here's a representative passage from the beginning, and I'm going to read this entire passage out. It was about this time that our townfolk began to show signs of uneasiness. For from April 18th onwards, quantities of dead or dying rats were found in factories and warehouses. From the outer suburbs to the center of the town, in all the byways where the doctor's duties took him, in every thoroughfare, rats were piled up in garbage cans or lying in long lines in gutters. The evening papers that day took up the matter and inquired whether or not the city fathers were going to take steps and what emergency measures were being contemplated. To evade this particularly disgusting nuisance, actually the municipality had not contemplated doing anything at all, but now a meeting was being convened to discuss the situation. But the situation worsened in the following days. Things went so far that the Ranstock Information Bureau, which ran a free information talk on the radio, by way of publicity, began its talk by announcing no more than 6231 rats had been collected and burned in a single day, April 25th. Giving as it did an ampler and more precise view of the scene daily enacted before our eyes, this amazing figure administered a jolt to the public nerves. Hitherto, people had merely grumbled at a stupid, rather obnoxious visitation. They now realized that this strange phenomenon, whose scope could not be measured and whose origins escaped detection, had something vaguely menacing about it. Only the old Spaniard, whom Dr. Ryu, who was the major character in the novel, was treating for asthma, went on rubbing his hands and chuckling. They're coming out with senile glee. On April 28, when the Ranstock Bureau announced that 8,000 rats had been collected, a wave of something like panic spread through the town. Again, Anjali Kolb conducts a depth reading to compare the rats as an allegorical epidemiologization of disappeared life that aligns with the absent natives in the novel. Interestingly, while the plague is set in Algeria, it hardly talks about any native Algerian character, right? I bypassed the allegorical depths to conduct a surface reading of the continuations with Defoe. Defoe's relative vagueness about temporal markers, about the beginning of September, contrasts with Camus' precision about the progression of time, April 24th, April 25th, April 28th, and so on, and a number of rats collected. This steady anchoring in chronos or time has this talismanic power to propel plot. The mass ritual of reading the evening newspaper becomes a civic exercise to put public pressure on the public authorities. Space-time compression and the spread of panic is accentuated by another media form, the radio. Radio broadcasts jolt the public nerves and later impel a wave of something like panic. Otherness too erupts suddenly in a town populated largely by Frenchmen, seemingly bereft of native Algerians. The Spaniard seems to gesture inscrutably towards a mystical form of knowledge unavailable to denizens of Oran. Finally, the nervous condition of the town ebbs and flows. Anxiety rises with the numbers revealed by the radio broadcast, while it ebbs at the end with another broadcast about numbers. Compare this with Defoe's protagonist statement about the beginning of the plague, that the rumors died off in September, only to be resuscitated in late November to early December. In an era of heightened mediatic simultaneity, the ebb and flow of panic and anxiety occurs on a day-to-day basis, compressing temporal experience. Okay, let me now play a clip from this movie called World War Z. So I'd like you to watch this clip carefully, and then I'll go on to discuss the continuities between Defoe, between Camus, and what I've read earlier. This is a big budget zombie movie starring Brad Pitt, but I'm only going to show you the name casting sequence of this. Okay, so please watch this carefully.
This is JTL Morning News. Good morning. This is Holly Chapman. I'm Gadhi. Thanks for joining us. We have a great show this morning.
Well, it's great now over in the spectrum of sports.
Authorities have confirmed an in-house cloudy skies with flurries today, ranging from bright a different scenario. The virus changes in a way that allows transmission between humans.
So let's get started.
Yet again today, another group of dolphins became stranded.
CO2 emissions have dramatically increased in the last.
Are there any real threats that you know?
Not at all.
Environmentalists are trying to determine the cause of death.
At alert level 6, WHO guidelines for governments will be.
Your socks are so cute.
Police say they've seen similar cases recently of people behaving strangely.
The UN Health Agency is not likely to recommend official travel restrictions.
Unsettling. They're not physicists. They're not engineers. They think it's just going to go away. They live in a fantasy parallel universe.
On top of the men eating them fanatic.
21 confirmed cases.
All the talk about the doomsday is a big hoax.
Suffolk Crowd continue to evolve.
Their best estimate is a
Don't know if this is ready.
Humans change.
So far, there's no manifestation.
Okay, so let me get back to my paper, right? This clip, of course, is from World War Z, which is a zombie film. And as I said, my own interest in plague narratives began by teaching zombie cinema, for that matter. Like plague narratives, zombie films are also narratives of media contagion. This connection between media and zombie contagions occurs in two ways. First, we can read zombie films as a progressive genealogy of media forms. Consider, for instance, that the role television and radio plays in a classic zombie film like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, video game simulation in movies like Resident Evil, the surveillance camera in 28 Days Later, and the use of cell phone imagery in a Native American zomcom, The Dead Can't Dance. In fact, I've written a paper also on the Indian zombie movie Go Goa Gone, and there too, I talk a lot about, for instance, the video game aesthetic of that particular film, right? In such films, new media forms both become a medium for spreading panic, while it also shows their embeddedness in the everyday, which presupposes particular forms of spectator positions from the audience. Second, like Bullock and Lenz discuss the infectious living dead category of media like writing, how forms like the book can both transmit viruses and exist like zombies that can be restored by later readers. The dead letter here becomes reinfused with life. This, of course, is a classic point in deconstruction. If you read Derrida, this is the point that he keeps on raising on over and over again, this living dead quality of writing, the fact that it can be resuscitated later on, so to speak. This point can also be extended to later media products like the photograph and the moving image. Consider the terms that the famous French critic André Bazin uses to describe photographs and moving images. Time embalmed and change mummified, respectively. In both cases, Bazin describes these plastic arts with terms that represents forms of life and death, or the zombie for that matter. The opening sequence of World War Z distills these different threads in a short space. Without further ado then, I'll try to describe this sequence and analyze it in this concluding portion of the talk. I agree with Kyle William Bishop that World War Z is a shift from a localized siege narrative to an international kind of road trip movie, a shift largely tied to the popularity of zombie-themed video games and the expectations and demands of viewers accustomed to such narratives, but also realizing that the globalized Gothic includes increased mobility. This view is correct if you consider former UN Representative Jerry or Brad Pitt's movements that track the planetary spread of the virus. However, while the plot of the movie unfolds on a planetary scale, the opening sequence, which I showed you, begins by resituating Euro-America as a kind of privileged cultural entity. The film first zooms in on the local national space before it spreads out to the rest of the panel. In this moment of zooming in, I would argue that it is far more similar to the opening narrative gambit of a journal of a plague year. Okay, so the opening sequence of World War Z operates on a conceit what happens over a significant amount of time seems to be compressed within a single day. The first two wide shots of the sequence show the waves rolling in and a day dawning. The music is somber and slow-paced. The third shot shows the rising sun peeking through the skyscrapers in an American city, probably Philadelphia, as the reference to JTL radio in one of the first spliced voiceover reveals. The succeeding montage then alternates between three sets of images: the everyday early morning rhythms of American life, images of everyday life from South and East Asia, and a steadily accelerating series of animal imagery. Simultaneously, as the musical tempo begins, slowly accelerating, the soundtrack is overlaid with snatches of media broadcasts, the JTL early morning radio show, and bits of information from TV shows and news. The voiceovers from television suited together mundane bits from early modern talk shows and ominous snatches about an infectious outbreak from news reports. Shots of airport information boards and departing aircraft alternate with automobiles lined up near a clogged US border post. If you go back to the previous section, if the aircraft reveals the ship as the iconic mode of international travel in late modernity, the automobile facilitates the conquest of national and transcontinental land space. But like the waterways in Defoe, they also become conduits for the plague's entry into the nation's geobody. There's an increasing reliance on television footage in the later half, as images of a talk show, a lifestyle show, beach dolphins, a talking head warning of the dangers of carbon emission, skeptics who warn about the UN's reluctance to restrict international travel, bureaucrats who say everything will be fine, a horrifying grainy clip of a scene of violence caught by a surveillance camera, and a doomsday skeptic succeed each other. Meanwhile, images of predominantly empty spaces in the West are often juxtaposed with crowded spaces in Asia. While there are three shots of crowds in Western spaces, the first of people alighting from a train, the second of a rock concert, and the third of a crowded urban street, the only shot from the East that is relatively empty is that of a matha ice cream seller on a bicycle in India. The ice cream seller is in the foreground and a hazy sheen of dust is in the background. Animal imagery begins with wide shots of birds taking to the sky, then shifts towards grainy shots of insect swarms as the music steadily rises to a fever pitch to align with the accelerated montage. It focuses on predatory animals like wolves and scavengers like vultures. In this accelerated montage, images of people in masks also recur, signifying that the plague has reached its crescendo. Through an astute juxtaposition of images of varying length, sound, and music, this sequence draws on existing tropes of what Priscilla Ward calls outbreak narratives. In such narratives, disease is exported as a commodity in the dangerously promiscuous spaces of a global economy conceived as an ecology. While this aspect is nascent in Defoe's A Journal of the Plague Year, it is heightened manifold in World War Z. Crowds, a dusty haze and dirt, a standard visual tropes about South Asia and Hollywood productions, are omnipresent in the Indian sequences evidenced by the dusty filter and the shots of cramped public spaces. People are also wearing masks in the East Asian locales. Given that the plague slowly approaches the Western spaces as the segment progresses, the insinuation that the disease originates elsewhere is clear. The global economy conceived as ecology is evident from three shots of birds flying parallel with the display board of an airport and an aircraft leaving. If planes are the primary mode of mobility in a network globe, flocks of birds too cross national borders. If airports have replaced naval ports as the primary entry points that introduce pathogens into the body of a nation, birds can be carriers of viruses like H1N1 or the bird flu. Economy folds into ecology and vice versa. Flocks of birds are only one major collective formation displayed, heightened later by a shot of chaotic flat flight patterns as the music increases in tempo. These bird formations are juxtaposed with other collectives, crowds of people, packs of wolves, and insect swarms. Each collective has an attached symbolism of their own. Following Elias Canetti, we can call the human collectives represented as stagnating crowds. Its state has something passive in it. It waits. This is evident if you consider the crowds coming out of the subway train, walking in the city streets, filing through the airport terminal, or standing on a bus. Bodies are jammed together, yet individuals seem to go by his or her everyday rhythm as an isolated monad. The crowd at the rock concert is more active, but the activity of such a stagnant crowd too operates via rhythms. People move when the camera comes close to them, in carnivalesque kind of celebration. Contrast this activity of humans with the frenetic activity of wolf packs or insect swarms, prefigurations of hordes of zombies later in the film. Wolves play a dominant role in Western political theology. Consider one of the opening sequence statements of Thomas Hobbes's De Cive, that man to man is a kind of God, and that man to man is a kind of errant wolf, or in Latin, homo homini lupus, homo homini deus. The wolf represents a form of pre-political animality that lies suppressed beneath the mask of the human. Canetti defines the pack as an elemental form of the crowd, small hordes that roam as groups of 10 or 20, characterized by the fact that it cannot grow, and most importantly, a formation where the individual can never lose himself as completely as modern man can in the crowd today. No wonder then that, like wolves, animals that humans knew well and were impressed by very early serve as models of such elemental pre-political forms of association. In the conservative political theology that often predicate zombie apocalypses like World War Z, this fall into a pre-political state reveals the wolf-like nature of the human. Insect swarms, besides being perceived as vectors of disease and filth, represent a different kind of otherness. Recently, there's been an affirmative representation of swarms as forms of decentralized intelligence, and I speak about that in post-colonial animalities. Here, a more negative connotations of swarm also persists, a collective formation that seems to move, attack, or consume mindlessly by instinct, much like the insects frenetically consuming other beings in the opening sequence. Indeed, in the opening set piece of the film set in a Philadelphia boulevard, crowds of humans become swarms of zombies as the virus is transmitted transcorporeally by the zombie bite. The swarms of insects also prefigure how swarms of zombies create panic in Philadelphia street in the first set piece of the movie. However, the opening sequence which I showed you shows the different rhythms by which panic arrives in Western shores from elsewhere. Mediated simultaneously again plays a big role here. Besides the radio and television, we also have a shot of people glued to their iPhones as the tempo of the music accelerates. An interesting moment fuses media and animality in the clip. Around the minute mark of this opening sequence, we notice a still shot of beach dolphins from a television news broadcast. This is, in Bazan's term, an example of embalmed time. The dead image showing still bloody animal corpses. What causes the dolphins to breach is a mystery, the newscaster's voice says. While dolphin beatings can be spectacular occurrences, such events flow under the radar unless it happens elsewhere, as for instance the Sundarbans depicted in Amitav Ghosh's Gun Island, for instance. What raises the alarm in World War Z is that it is happening here in Euro-American spaces with repeated regularity. The music too begins to rise in tempo as the length of the shots becomes shorter and shorter. As in a journal of the plague year, the first intimation of dangers to hit our shores comes from the fringes of the nation's geobody, its shorelines. Everyday life continues with regular but uneasy rhythms after the shot that jolts the public nerves, but increasing simultaneous exposure to what is happening there and here by various media forms, accentuated by speeded up montage and a cacophonous overlay of voiceovers, brings the disaster home and creates a wave of something like panic. Soon it mattered not from whence it came, but all agreed it was come. And I'd like to end with a brief kind of autobiographical segment When the coronavirus first hit, or when we first heard about the coronavirus, it was in the October of 2019. I just returned back from India. My father had passed away. I'd spent like 5 months in India, and we just vaguely heard about this coronavirus thing which had happened in Wuhan. I returned to India in 2019. This was the time of the CAA protests in Guwahati as well. And at that time, too, people were still talking about it as a distant occurrence, right? It was still happening in China and so on and so forth. So we were hearing about this in news reports, just like in Defoe's things. It was coming slowly and slowly closer to us, but it hadn't really hit the shores. I came back to Oklahoma, and we started teaching again. The semester began. This was around March. It was a department meeting, I clearly remember, where the chair of my department said that we need to take precautions because Corona might be coming to the US. At that point of time, it hadn't really come, right? So it was still out there, so to speak. It was still coming in slow waves. 2 weeks later, everything shut down. And from that moment on, it has been shut down. So it was, in some sense, it does not, to go back to the title of my paper, it mattered not from when it came, but all agreed that it was coming. The moment it comes, everything shuts down as well. On that note, I'd like to end this talk. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer. Any questions or comments?
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes, continue.
Yes, sir. Participants are requested to ask questions. Okay. Thanks a lot, sir, for illuminating thoroughly on Journal of Plague Year by Daniel Defoe. Sir has thoroughly explained the spread of plague disease in that century, origins of plague, circulations of capital, plague arising through ships. And he also explained how the connection between media and society, rumors of disease spread in society, and how people become panic. He explained also difference between actual plague and media plague. Rumors make people frightened, panic, and leads to confusion. And there was gradual rise of infection of disease and the way of publicity of disease and how people grumbled about death and spread of disease rapidly. It put the pressure on their mentality and anxiety increased day by day. I think all of we have gone through the same situation due to the spread of coronavirus in 21st century. After this, I would like to request today's resource person, Dr. Mustajib Khan Sir, Professor, Department of English, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar University, Aurangabad, Maharashtra, to express his thoughts on post-COVID-19 changes in academic field, merits and demerits. Dr. Mustajib Khan Sir.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Please respond.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, first of all, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to have my talk on post-COVID scenario in India, especially in Maharashtra. First of all, I appreciate and congratulate the college for celebrating National Education Day and commemorating Maulana Abul Kalam Azad's 133rd birth anniversary. Since we are living in a post-pandemic period, and it is quite difficult to find out that how we are going to face this situation, because we have already living in such a terrific and terrible scenario that for last 2 years, I may say, we are not in actual classrooms. What I am proposed to talk on is the scenario that we are going to face once we open. How this pandemic, COVID-19, changed the whole understanding of academic world, especially the academic world of India and Maharashtra. Friends, since we are familiar with the fact that post-COVID-19 is yet to begin, because we are still living in pandemic situation where we are not confirmed that whether this pandemic is converted into epidemic, because we are still not confirmed with an idea whether the third wave will arrive or not, and what will happen if the third wave arrives. How are we going to face all those things in our academic world? Being a teacher in the university, the picture which we used to find out and the picture which we used to see altogether is something very different. What in the morning keynote address Amit has talked about, and he tried to bring out the whole idea about how the plague, how the pandemics reflected in literature, and how this pandemic is going to be part of our routine life and reflected in movies also, with an imaginary situations that used to take place there. But coming out of this imagined world and imagined communities, we are facing something very difficult and different understanding right now. Now, what are we facing? What are we looking at? Friends, for last 2 years, from March 20, we have seen that the chaos and the chaotic situation that we have faced in our whole world of academia. Nobody will deny the fact that we lost all the grandeur of having a classroom activity and the teaching to the students in the classrooms. Now, friends, if you see this situation very carefully, as this is position as a teachers of graduate and undergraduate classes, we faced some difficult situations right now. Students are going to examinations with online mode. If the student belongs to language, any language, his language skills are not being tested properly. The student is going to get good marks in the sense he is getting first class more than 60%, more than 70%, and still unable to understand the concept very properly if he goes out of the institute into the market. The cutthroat competition outside, where he has to survive, where he has to fight for, will the student be able to stay very firmly with his mark sheets in his hands and making us to feel that he will be properly absorbed in the whole system. What I'm going to talk and what I'm going to discuss with you is simply I'm trying to put certain queries and questions to ponder over. As a teachers, we have to ponder over certain issues, and we have to ponder over certain critical situations that we are going to face in our coming lives. Being a teacher, we know it very well that language requires a kind of skill to be developed in the students. Communication studies always pointed out that it required a kind of skill with 4 basic kinds of LSRW kind of skills need to be developed among the students, learners, so that they can able to get acquainted with the skills to stand up into the market. Whether this COVID-19 situation, whether this epidemic, which we have seen, and I'm calling it now epidemic, not pandemic. The whole critical thing which we have seen in last year, where we have seen nobody is coming to the classrooms. Teachers are asked to have an online classes by the government. And you have seen and you have, I cannot say enjoyed, but you have simply experienced the chaotic situation of online classes with all of us. Are we really sincerely satisfied with what online goes on? The kind of online classes. Now, if you are looking at this webinar also, we are quite, you can see very comfortably right now that nobody is interested in watching what exactly going on. Nobody is very serious about what the things are going on in an online mode. In an online mode, people used to attend that particular lecture at that time. Maybe they are on, but they are not in front of the camera. Maybe they are listening to you, but they are involved in their other activities. Maybe they are posing to you that they are listening to you, but involved in their day-to-day routine activities. If this is the case of learned teachers in a webinar, please remember, please understand what would be the situation of the students in the classroom. And when we are commemorating Maulana Abul Kalam Azad's 133rd birth anniversary, at that time we need to understand the seriousness of education and education policies that Maulana Azad initiated in India. He was insisting continuously and pointing out continuously that we need to nurture the learners and students of this country so that they can able to develop their skills and can able to make the nation once again on the growth and path of growth. Do we really understand that what Maulana Abul Kalam Azad initiated with and started with UGC, University Grants Commission, trying to make the teachers to get familiar with higher education and trying to inculcate the higher education as per the need of this particular society and land. Unfortunately, we have lost all these ideas that exactly higher education means by. Are we really serious to understand the fact that what kind of education we are percolating to the students sitting in front of us? Are we really bothered about the kind of education that we are going to deliver into the classroom? That education is sustainable, that education is suitable, that education is beneficial for the students or not? Is it not the responsibility of the teacher standing in front of the teacher, students, and students expecting from the teacher that my teacher is going to tell you to give me something different than what exactly he's expecting from the teacher? But teachers are not at all, unfortunately, my friends, I'm very sorry to say this, that teachers are not at all interested in understanding what is their role. And in pandemic phase, in the post-pandemic phase, you will find out that teachers are forgetting their role to play. The most crucial thing that we need to understand as teachers of graduate and postgraduate studies, that pandemic made us to ponder over serious issues such as how can we able to deal with our students. Whether it is so simply going on online mode and trying to deal with the students, whether that student is interested in listening to what you are going to tell or what you are going to express or not, or are we going to have a kind of simple procedural work by going online and telling something what we want to tell and without ever understanding that what the student is interested in knowing things or not? We are learned. My query and my question is, we are learned people. We have completed our post-graduation. We have completed our doctoral work. We are calling ourselves as doctors. The highest ever achievement in the field of academics, being master into that particular area. Are we really proving the master's skill into that area when we go on online mode? Or can we, or can I call that we are becoming jack of all trades and master of none? We don't know what exactly we are going to deal in the post-pandemic phase. No board of studies, no universities are focusing on what kind of syllabi that needs to be relate with the student when he enters into the classroom, probably from 15th, probably by the end of November, when he comes to the classroom, what kind of classroom activities are we going to run with that particular student? Because nowadays, students, they are interested in entering into the world of technology. Students are interested in going with an online mode. Students are able to listen the very better and best and good quality academic lectures on YouTube. Students are going to have a very academically powerful teachers appearing on YouTube with their lectures. Teachers need to understand this particular fact that students are coming with certain new ideas and new terms and terminologies when they are appearing into the classrooms. Are we really ready to face those students coming into the classroom, or we are playing the same cards once again, asking the student to just simply get ready for the examination and get good marks and get out of the classroom? What is the basic and real condition of our classrooms across Maharashtra, across India, and especially if you look at Marathwada? Although we are talking about an international conference today, international conference in postmodern world is called as the issue that we talk about local. The local issue becomes global issue. That is what a postmodern term of local and local to global goes on. If you don't understand what exactly we require at a local level, we are not able to talk about what we are going to have at a global level. You heard what Amit says, a teacher from USA spoke to you. I am quite afraid that how many of us have understood what he talked about, what he discussed about. How many of us are familiar with Daniel Defoe's Plague? How many of us are aware of Albert Camus' book Plague? How many of us have seen the movies on zombies? How many of us are familiar with the word zombie itself? We are not at all getting aware of all those things, and still we are going to face our students into the classroom with our white face and telling them the same kind of stories that we have talked with them before pandemic. Friends, I may be a little bit harsh. I may be a little bit, you can say, you will not appreciate and you will not like that. Why he's telling so much of things? We know what ideal means and why he's telling us ideal things. But I'm worried about a teacher of the university. That when a student is sitting in front of me, that student is not able to understand what exactly I'm going to talk with him. No critical term, no literal term, no social term, no political term. Are we really, if we try to understand what exactly is going to happen with the post-truth condition that developed during Donald Trump's period, whether that post-truth is a part of our routine life or not, are we really able to understand that or not? But very sorry to say, how many of us are familiar with the word called post-truth? What is meant by post-truth? We are unable to understand this idea of post-truth. How many of us are familiar to understand the fact that we are going to face a new national education policy? What is this new national education policy is all about? How this national education policy is going to change our whole pattern of understanding? Or are we going to remain the same? Are we going to remain the same till the last moment, that what exactly it means by we are not interested in knowing it? We simply want to carry out the text and the yellow pages, the golden notes that are in our hands. When we are celebrating 133rd birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, we need to understand this particular fact. Otherwise, we are simply mocking over the policies and fighting over the thing that we need to have a pay scales and we need to have so much amount of money from the government, and the society is asking questions to the teachers of the colleges and universities, what kind of work you do? Are we really responsible for the stakeholders of our own colleges and universities? Pandemic COVID-19 made us to realize this fact. What is the role of teacher in pandemic? What did teacher do in pandemic? Whether the teacher really changed the whole understanding of pandemic to the students. How much of students are getting close to the teachers? Or we are forcing our students to have a data card and mobile and have a screen and sit in front of the screen and have a talk on that screen. How many of us are aware of this particular fact that my students are not able to talk on the screen very comfortably? Are we forcing them to be a techno-savvy all of a sudden? Are we forcing the student of a rural India to be in a techno-savvy? And if he is not able to become a techno-savvy, he is committing a suicide. We have so many cases taken place across Tamil Nadu. Students are committing suicide because their parents were unable to give them what kind of infrastructure you are expecting from them. Being a teacher, we need to understand this important fact on this day, especially. That if we are not able to understand on this day, when we are commemorating the India's first education minister's birth anniversary, and if we are not able to understand what kind of life we are living within, then how are we going to call ourselves as the teachers who are very much part of the society? This pandemic, when you are having a topic called merit and demerit, in a country like India, pandemic always bring demerits most of the time, because it exposes your face that you are not technologically sound, you are not able to provide the infrastructure, technology with the students, technology with the teachers. You are supporting the new capitalists. You are creating once again the neo-colonial atmosphere, developing a kind of hegemony amongst the students that we have to have a mobile or screen to have a classes. If it is not, then we are not able to teach you. You are not going to get good marks. If you are not going for an online examination mode, you are not going to get good marks. You will not going to get any certificate. And this online mode, please ask your own students once if they come back to your classes, ask your own students whether they are satisfied with this online mode of examination. Do we have any alternate for that? Do we ever ponder for the alternates for all these things? When India, in 1947, became the nation at the first, getting its independence, getting its freedom. And after 1950, when it becomes a republic, it requires so much of illiterate people to make them to be literate. And a big responsibility was at the first government of India, led by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. The whole cabinet discussed about education at primary level, but Maulana Abul Kalam Azad insisted that we have to focus on the higher education also, and that's why he has started UGC in the first 5-year plan, on which we are now surviving with the help of this UGC. Why? Why this idea of UGC appeared? Because it requires, it tries to make the people literate. It tries to make people to get close to education. It makes the people come to close to the doors of education. And once they come to the doors of education, now what is happening in the post-pandemic phase? That they are not interested in sitting inside the classroom. They are not interested in listening to what we are going to say. They are not interested in understanding what you want to talk about. Why? Because we, as a teachers, need to introspect ourselves that are we really reading something which the teacher, which the student requires? Are we familiar with certain kinds of words that a student requires? Are we really presenting the kind of words to the student which he is expecting today in his day-to-day life? Or are we going to talk about the text which is written somewhere in 15th century, 16th century, 17th century, and trying to insist and impose that 15th, 16th, 17th centuries ideas on the minds of the student who is sitting in the 21st century classroom? What is an idea of classroom today? On the National Education Day, we need to understand the idea of classroom today. The idea of classroom today requires that your classroom should have all kinds of facility available for the students. Are we really student-centric? Are we really looking at students, what they want to talk, what they expect, what they want from us? Or we are electing our board of studies members who are politically motivated? Are we politically motivated in the classroom? Classroom is a kind of world where you have a complete secular kind of ambience, where a student can ask a question to the teacher. Post-pandemic phase made the student to keep mum. Post-pandemic phase made the student to keep away from the teacher. coming on online, he is not at all showing his face to the teacher. He is moving away from the classroom. Are we really trying to bring him back to the classrooms? Are we really trying to make him understand the fact that we are living in the world which is called as under surveillance for day and night? Susan Zuboff wrote a book called The Surveillance Capitalism. And in surveillance capitalism, Susan Zuboff mentioned that we are under surveillance for 24/7. We are under surveillance for day and night. Don't consider that you are not under surveillance. You are continuously under surveillance. Please remember the novel written by George Orwell, 1984, where Big Brother is looking at you. Are you going to make your student aware of the fact that whatever he writes on social media, whatever he makes a move on social media, whatever kind of words he used in social media, he is going to be under surveillance for day and night? Are we going to give an idea to our students that, look, if you are writing on WhatsApp and deleting it afterwards, it is not going to be get deleted forever. It is going to remain there till the world comes to an end. And the best examples nowadays you are finding in the chat recovered by NCB and all the cases that you are listening on news, that how chats are recovered, how Facebook posts are recovered, how Facebook whistleblower mentioned that Facebook has developed a hatred in India. Facebook has not even regulated the post which develops a kind of violence and enmity between two communities in India. The whistleblower mentioned, given a report across the world is worried about all those things. Are we making our students aware of this fact that this online mode and this post-pandemic phase had changed the whole understanding? Are we going to make our student literate that we are nowadays became patients? They're psychiatric patients. Why I'm saying we are psychiatric patients? Because this post-pandemic world make us so much close to our screen and make us to watch our mobile phone for so much of a long time. Find out yourself that if you don't use what Amit said in the morning about zombie, that once you bite a zombie, that other person becomes zombie because the kind of virus that entered into his body changes his whole structure of body. We are also becoming zombies. Why we are becoming zombies? Because if we don't open our mobile after 5 minutes, we are getting uneasy. Checking what happens on WhatsApp, what happens on Facebook. We are interested in looking at Facebook and WhatsApp after 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We are interested in looking at mobile for again and again. And if we don't look at mobile, we are getting uneasy. We are worried about all those things. Now, these are the new facts appearing in front of us. These are the new issues appearing in front of us. Are we able to keep our mobile away for 1 hour? No. If you keep your mobile at home and go to the college, you will feel uneasy that I forgot my mobile at home. And you try again and again to get it back. Mobile becomes your habit, not habit, we addicted to it. This addiction is developed in the online mode of education. The screen time, what doctors used to say that you have to face the screen for 90 minutes in a day, not more than 90 minutes. Are we really facing the screen for 90 minutes? This post-pandemic phase increased the screen time of every individual. We need to make aware our students about this screen time. Are we really know about screen time? Are we really know about how much screen time is scientifically allowed for a human being? We are not able to understand this important fact, and this post-pandemic is trying to make you convinced that you need to be techno-savvy, and if you are techno-savvy, you need to have an understanding of your whole process, that how it is going on. It is very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate on part of our whole fraternity that we are not at all interested in understanding what kind of post-pandemic classrooms that we are going to face. Why a student should listen to you if he is getting a very better class and good class? If he can able to listen Edward's side directly, why he will listen to your Orientalism? If he is able to listen Gayatri Chakravarti's Spivak directly, why he will listen to you? If he is going to listen directly a playwright and he can able to watch the play on the screen, why he will attend your drama classes? If he is able to get all the films available on his palm, why he should attend your classes and ask you questions? And how are we going to frame a question if we are not familiar with what kind of different versions that are available to us? Shakespeare, why Shakespeare is called as great? Because Shakespeare has added, because it was said by Plato in his Republic, that if you add one word into your language, you revolutionized it. How much? One word into your language, new word into your language, it means you have developed or you have revolutionized the language. And Shakespeare has added more than 17,000 words into English language. Are we really going to find out that what are those words Shakespeare added into English language? Or what kind of new words added into language today? How this pandemic has changed the whole understanding of language today? Are we using the same kind of English that we used to have in our day-to-day life? We have changed our English. We are using pidgin languages. Are we really able to understand what exactly?
यहाँ पे हर एक चीज लगा दी मैडम, उसो नहीं तो चढ़ क्यों ना अब यहाँ पे खिलाफी करें? फिर वही सर क्यों बोलते नहीं उन्होंने डिपार्टमेंट का काम तुम ये देखो, उनको ये देखने का है, क्यों नहीं बोलते? शफा सर क्यों यहाँ लेके बैठे? फिर उन्होंने एक कब तक करेंगे?
उन्होंने हम दोनों मैथ्स के डिपार्टमेंट से लैब पढ़ा दिए। हमारे लेक्चर हमारा प्रैक्टिकल भी नहीं है ना, हमारे पूरे लेक्चर भी छोड़ते हैं। हाँ। अच्छा पूरे लेक्चर छोड़ने के बाद आपको बैक जाना है ना।
Somebody's mic is on. जिस किसी का भी माइक शुरू हो जरा मेहरबानी।
अब 8:20 से लेक्चर है। तुम देर रात तक खाते थे 1 बजे तक। एडमिशन से कंटिन्यू तो मैंने मेरे को सामने बोलते ही देख आपने दिए क्या?
Yeah, thank you. But somebody, this is what a demerit of online. That you don't know who starts its mic, and we are able to listen whatever talk they are having in the staff room. The staff room politics is appearing on screen without their own understanding. So if you see very carefully, this is one of the most interesting demerit of online, that you are not able to understand the classroom, the staff room is going on air immediately. Everybody, so many participants, 43 participants are there, and all the 43 participants are listening what these two women are talking. These are the demerits, small demerits. Immediate practical live example appeared in front of you, fortunately. So my point is, are we really going to understand what exactly is the motive, what exactly is the mode of our teaching in the classroom? Are we really making our student to understand what exactly, how he has to face the world? Are we making our students to understand very important fact that, yes, he is under surveillance. The whole world is watching. You are continuously under surveillance by these capitalists. How are you going to teach a poem to the student if the poem is already available on the screen to him? If he opens a page, if you are teaching William Wordsworth's Daffodils, and if you clicked it on internet, you will find out thousands and thousands of pages available on Daffodils, available on internet. He reads all those pages and asks you certain questions. Are we able to answer those questions? Are we familiar with the fact that how many pages are available on internet about our topic that we are going to teach into the classroom? What kind of reading I require as a teacher now as in the post-pandemic classroom? What kind of text I should refer as a post-pandemic classroom teacher? Am I really going to talk with my students the post-pandemic world in front of him? Or am I going to talk with my students the world which was before pandemic? The student who was admitted last year, he passed out first year without watching your face. He appeared in the second year. And if the classes will open by the end of this month, he'll see your face. Otherwise, he'll pass out without seeing your face, without sitting in the classroom and getting a degree afterwards. Are you really able to understand that whether that degree will help him to get some kind of opportunities in the society? Nowadays, advertisements are coming that online students are not required. Are we really able to find out what kind of solutions being a teacher we should have with us? Are we really able to understand what kind of situations that we are going to face in the classroom tomorrow if the classroom gets open? How many students are going to sit in my classroom and what kind of students they are expecting, what kind of lecture they are expecting from me? Am I really able to prepare myself for the kind of lectures that the students are expecting after coming into the classroom? Am I able to point out that kind of lectures that my students are expecting from me? Friends, please understand, please find out the fact that the student requires a kind of teaching from a teacher. A student requires a kind of teaching from a teacher which is post-pandemic teaching. What is post-pandemic teaching? Post-pandemic teaching is a teacher should know what kind of things are available online and which are already with the student. Now, as a teacher, I am going to give him something different out of this. If a student like me sitting in a classroom, I'll ask my teacher, sir, I'm already reading, I've already read with this particular kind of things available on internet. Please tell me something different, tell me something new. And being a teacher, it will be our responsibility to tell us something new to my student so that he can come and sit into my class. Otherwise, the class, which is post-pandemic class, will not suffice the work that is expected. We need to understand this very important fact, my friends, that this post-pandemic classroom is very different kind of classroom. This post-pandemic classroom requires your skill as a teacher to utilize the online source material available for you. The kind of online material available for you, the kind of study which you have, how you amalgamate these two things all together and try to present it in front of the students so that the student can able to understand the things very comfortably and can survive in this world without having any kind of difficulties. Otherwise, if he goes into the market and doesn't know anything that what he requires, then he'll curse us that I don't have any kind of teachers. Right now, I've received a chat that, sir, I am a third semester student and till today, I have not seen my professor's face. This is a live chat I received from one of the students here. Please look at the reactions of the students. And if we are not able to understand how a post-pandemic classroom should be, then we are not able to survive very comfortably. Please understand this fact, my friends, that this post-pandemic world will be the most cruel world. Because this world will ask you a kind of material to be presented in front of the students. This post-pandemic classroom will ask you amalgamation of your skills as a teacher and online sources available to the students. How will you amalgamate those two things and present it in front of the students? How will you suggest a kind of idea to the universities? Because as a teachers in India, we are going to face NAC accreditation. And NAC always asks you what kind of innovative methods you have used in your teaching and learning. We played so many tricks with NAC for teaching and learning evaluation, and we presented it and we got some kind of grade in the classroom. But are we really going to get this kind of grade in the classroom? Are we really going to get this kind of understanding in the classroom? That is what we need to understand very carefully. Otherwise, the post-pandemic classroom will be some kind of a fake world for the students. They'll feel that the teachers are not able to get the things very properly. The teachers are not able to understand the new terminology. The socio-political cultural terminology, the change in cultural understanding, the change in the ambiences of understanding, we need to ponder over very seriously. Otherwise, the motive of going into the classroom will not be able to reach to its ultimate aim and ultimate goal. Friends, I'm not here to give you certain advices, but as a teacher, these are certain queries and questions that came into my mind, and I'm thankful to the administration of the college that they allowed me to be the part of your whole deliberations and discussions so that I can able to share my points and views with you. I hope that my sayings will make you to understand, to ponder over certain issues. Thank you very much for calling me for this session. Thank you, one and all. If there are any queries, if there are any questions, if there are anything to discuss with me, I'm here. I think I'm self-explanatory. That's why nobody is interested in asking questions. Or this may be the demerit of online. Yeah, Ahir ma'am, this may be the demerit of the online.
Yes. Yes, sir. There are
That nobody is interested in asking
of online education, and
yeah.
nobody wants to share their views about demerits of online education. That's why it's happening.
Everybody's happy with what is going on.
Nobody, I think nobody have any query. All the participants are requested to ask any queries about merits and demerits of online education. If anyone asks question about this, sir, I think no one have any query.
Okay, if there are no one, thank you.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you, sir, Dr. Mustajib Khan, sir, for this wonderful and thought-provoking session and for explaining impact of post-COVID pandemic scenario on our classrooms, on our academic world, and also we have discussed about the difficult, chaotic situation faced by our academia, by our teachers and students. The harsh realities, facts of online teaching learning process. That we have observed examinations are conducted by online mode and how the students understood the concepts of education by online mode. As we have observed, students fight to survive in cutthroat competition. Critical situations are going to be faced by our academic world. We have challenged to develop skills among the students and growth of nation. Is the online education sustainable or not? We should find out the answers for these questions. Your talk made everyone serious and think about the harsh realities of online education. Thank you, Mr. Khan, sir. Afterwards, I would like to request today's second resource person, Dr. Nawaz Jamal, sir, Professor, Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia, Central University, New Delhi. Sir, please guide us on merits and demerits of post-COVID-19 changes in academic field. Dr. Nawaz Jamal, sir.
At the outset, I want to thank the organizers, Chief Patron, Honorable Sri Amar Sinha Ji Pandit, Honorable Ashok Roy Patel, respected principals, Dr. V.K. Kadam, Art and Science College, Gadhi, Dr. Patel K.B. Saraswati Mahavidyalaya, Kaij, and the esteemed conveners without whom this program would not have been there, Dr. Zahid Siddiqui, Dr. Ashar, Ms. Rakte, Mr. Ram Rule, and my co-panelists who have really enlightened already the wide gamut of understanding education in post-COVID-19, Dr. Amit Rahul Bashya, Dr. Mustajib Khan. And my task has become more easy in the sense that how the plague and the aftermaths of the post-COVID has been highlighted. But we have to probe into. And organizers, I thank you for giving me the privilege to interact with the wide galaxies of scholars, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I feel honored and privileged to be with you, and also to highlight that how the World Health Organization and the world has been taken into an understanding of novel coronavirus, COVID-19, where the WHO called it wrong at best, tackling in January in China. And 1st January, there were 44 cases of pneumonia. Margaret Harris of WHO. On 4th and 5th Jan 2020, WHO put up notification about the pneumonia. 15 January, no lockdown. And the case was already there on 1st. And 4th and 5th, we have already highlighted that there is a pneumonia. And it was not clear about the transmission of this COVID-19 being a serious disease, requiring social distancing, and also the genome was described by China on 24th January. Test was done. The size of virus was not clear. John McKenzie that time told that it was not health emergency. Emergency committee also of the WHO, Public Health Emergency Committee, were brought together. Consensus was of the expert who said no consensus was achieved with the debate and the committee, and no declaration of the virus being so lethal. On 30th January, public health emergency was declared. So we have to understand the politics of virus. The novel 219 coronavirus pandemic has resulted in drastic change in the world. It is impossible to find out a sector that has not been affected by the pandemic. So was education. The sudden arrival of the pandemic threat baffled the governing system across the globe. Governments in the developing and underdeveloped countries are still struggling to tackle the problem and find out a balance. So to say it post-COVID is also a problem, because We are still struggling. Russia, many other countries are struggling, and also it is coming back. And it is really in such scenario to understand education, and also on the day of National Education Day, it becomes all the more important to understand and uncover the reality. And it's a privilege on 133rd birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, the first education minister and the visionary of bringing the institutional understanding of governance of education. But during the pandemic period, a section of thinkers looking into the problems positively. The corona pandemic and the subsequent lockdown are considered to be a blessing behind new invention and a new turning point in the construction of a strong and immune society. New mechanism, new methodologies revolutionized various spheres of life. And also it developed a new normal, be it gender issue, be it child rights issue, how the children were beaten up at home. So in this aspect, whether this normal, new normal is helping the states to sustain themselves is important question here. So I would be trying to attempt to look into the benefits and burdens of transformation in post-pandemic academic field. The WHO declared the outbreak as a pandemic very late on 11th March 2020. As I told you, friends, in January 1st, it was the cases, 40 pneumonia cases were already there. The whole world went for a shutdown with the declarations. Like all other sectors, educational institutions across the world is scrambled. The world witnessed a sudden transition from the traditional face-to-face chalk blackboard system of teaching to a completely online way of education. Both teachers and students were forced to adapt to a virtual mode of learning. Though in India, we do have a virtual mode of learning, you know. The best example, if you date back to 2004, on 20th September,
it is named as EduSat, that is educational satellite, the first educational satellite launched by India, so as to bring distant classroom. Education from school to higher education was taken care. And we know how it was utilized, whether it is Gyanvani, whether it is any other, IGNOU programs which are beamed across and also is still being beamed through Doordarshan channels. So India was never lost in the virtual mode of learning. Those who were fit and ready to deal with the situation sustained the process, and those who were not suffered. Friends, my own HOD died. She has another 13 years of service. Professor Savitri Kadlu, I pay humble homage to her demise soul because of COVID-19 on service while performing her duties. There are many other people. We have Professor Shafiq, who was from Malegaon, a very dynamic professor, foreign educated, foreign experienced, and was working very nicely in my university as IQAC head. That is how we gained prominence in the world. He lost because of this COVID, and he was distributing medicines among friends about COVID. He was sensitizing people, and this was so venomous. So in general, we can say that the global education system got disrupted with the COVID-19 lockdown. This crisis also has exposed many inadequacies and also discrimination in our education system. The education system we followed proved to be an utter failure in terms of methodology and also in technology. My own students failed to join the class because broadband problem, wavelength problem. In Kashmir, 2G, is there. They cannot have, they don't have 4G, so they cannot work with proper classrooms. They cannot upload their assignments. They cannot upload the OB, open book exam on the website properly. So these were serious challenges, friends. With all the panoply of modern democratization and also the institutionalization of the online system, still we are grappling with a 130 billion power. You understand the growing need of population, growing need of technology, you say ICT, you know, or ICTE. The rapid closure of institutions has provided the countries little time for planning, and it was a big challenge for the world to set up a new system of education, which is built around physical schools. Online learning has become an urgent necessity for India and the world, rather than an option. Most of the countries use digital pedagogical tools and online classes so as to deliver education to their students through Google Classrooms, through virtual other modes, Zoom, many ways that they were using the technology. Scholars demanded the adoption of new mechanisms and technology so as to better deal with the situation of COVID-19. There was a problem in terms of education in the time of pandemic. We know very well, friends, education helps for upward socio-economic mobility. And that was the mission of the first education minister, so as to institutionalize the Nehruvian model of educating all. And how we know very well with the privatization, how things have been balkanized. You know, we have Jindal universities where a LLB degree is worth 60 lakh rupees. And in our own university, Jamia, it is worth 1,000 rupees. We are creating a new genre of scholars, genre of elites. So we have to understand. But however, there is a global consensus that the education system we followed failed their students in its quality and the ability, so as to ensure that all have the skills, to necessary skills to thrive. We have examples in Himachal where a villager is selling his buffalo to get a mobile for her only girl child to get classes online. Many other examples. So in this context, friends, as per the report of UNESCO Institute for Statistical, about 258.4 million children are out of school. 2018. That is representing nearly 1/6 of the global population at that age. And more than half of all children and adolescents worldwide are not attaining basic proficiency standards in reading and mathematics. So as per the report, countries with the highest out of school rates also tend to be among the poorest countries in the world. So strengthening the argument, as economist Len Pritchett explained in his book in 2013, The Rebirth of Education, even though almost all primary students in developing countries got admitted to schools, a huge amount of them are not learning even the basic literacy and numeracy skills necessary to continue learning. So friends, what we are really trying to prove, what we are really trying to understand is the system of education we practice was already flawed and served the interest of the developed states and rich communities. It was not prepared to deal with emergencies like COVID-19 lockdown. The coming of pandemic and its influence on global education has to be understood from this background. The sudden closure of physical schools ravaged the educational sector throughout the world. Around 188 countries having 91% of students worldwide closed their schools to curb the spread of the virus. The students who relied only on schools were left with no option to gain knowledge. Previous research revealed that students prefer outdoor and non-classroom related indoor spaces. and they become deprived of physical learning opportunities, social and emotional support available in the school, and also even extra services such as school meals. We know midday meals. Many school students come to school just to have a square meal. So the unavailability of school lunch exacerbates food insecurity and also raises substantial risk to the physical health and mental well-being of the children. The closure of early childhood education and care services, universities, and colleges along with the schools carry high social and economic costs for people across communities. Various social and economic issues, including the lack of the access to digital technology. So you have to buy data. Nothing is free. Government could have made a policy, on a moratorium of free data to all during the pandemic so that students and teachers can easily have access to the classes, and also an increased bandwidth and wavelength. Then there is also lack of training. Parents who have not been acclimatized to online learning or, educating were having a lot of problems, to upload assignments, to deal with technology, to deal with the need and the urgent requirement of the COVID-19 situation. So in such situations, you see homelessness, internet issues, even etc. have become visible with the shutdown of the educational institutions. Parents have to attend to their jobs. Now they have to take care of classes also. So this was a major challenge. Majority of cruelty happened. Women who were working from home under the patriarchal system, they were also abused. Children who were there in home were also abused. This is also a pitfall of COVID-19. Along with the visibility with the shutdown of the educational institutions. The teachers are also affected by the new situation, as was very rightly and aptly being highlighted by our esteemed speaker, Mustajib Saab. So we have to really understand the lack of proper digital training for teachers made online teaching unsuccessful. The new online education shifted the labor of education from schools to families, while there existed a non-conducive environment for learning in most of the households. The lockdown has witnessed increased dropout rates in the schools. According to the United Nations, 24 million may drop out of the school due to the economic fallout of COVID-19. So the closure of the school leads to the social isolation of children and youth. The learning losses may translate into even greater long-term challenges like less access to higher education, lower labor market participation, and lower future earnings. So the shutdown of educational institutions has a real impact on all students, but the impact is not equal among all. Children, youth, adults from the vulnerable communities, those living in poor, abject poverty or rural areas, even girls, minorities, oppressed caste, scheduled tribe, refugees, persons with disabilities, and also forcibly displaced are the most affected people. About 99% of the student population is poor and lower middle income were affected the most by the shutdown. While the students from privileged class had access to the digital tools, have access to the online education facilities. But it is the underprivileged students who had no little access to such tools and requirement further attention and support of the state. Even UNICEF, another UN agency, estimates that at least 1/3 of the world school children, around 463 million, are unable to access remote learning via radio, television, or other online means. On the other hand, we have the Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that everyone has a right to education So why the UN, unlike the Community Development Program, has launched a new program of online help among the underdeveloped countries, among the developing countries. However, if we see the UNESCO report, more than 1.5 billion students and youth around the world are or having been excluded from the access of education during the lockdown. As of 12 January 2021, approximately 825 million learners are currently affected due to school closures and colleges in response to the pandemic. So, friends, in reality, the shutdown of the educational institution expelled the disadvantaged students from availing themselves of only available educational opportunities. They had no access to digital learning, friends, and resources, or lack the resilience to learn on their own. So this disparity, this social economic disparity in access to education, which our founding father, which Maulana Abul Kalam Azad has visualized, is widening. The social class achievement gap between the communities, or we should say closure of school and colleges, has drastic effect upon poor people than the rich people. Then what is the approach with Amartya Sen's talk of capability approach? We have to really understand, friends. Globally, 3 out of 4 students who cannot be reached by remote learning opportunities come from rural areas or poor households. My own friends, I was deputy director of Residential Coaching Academy for IAS. Mavis Tak from Maharashtra, she was in distress during COVID. She said that, sir, I have to come because I cannot study in Pune. A lot of inundated rain has damaged, and I am from a poor family. I cannot survive. And our Honorable Vice Chancellor was generous during COVID period to give her permission. So this learning loss led to the deprivation of skills, which is directly connected to the people's productivity and socio-economic progress of the deprived communities, and thereby society in large. Then there were other pitfalls also. During the COVID, one person's student reached for IS coaching in our institution, and his report came late of the COVID, and he was positive. And we had 20 to 30 students who were infected because of this dreadful virus. But all of them are safe now, thankfully. But this is very, very serious, that how it bridged the gap between the deprived community further, how it really exacerbated this gap. So the burden of the pandemic on education can mainly be identified in 2 terms. In general, the pandemic stopped the ongoing university and school education throughout the world and produced various socio-economic issues. Secondly, the introduction of alternative technologies and methods helped only the privileged rich people and countries, while the poor communities and states were affected badly by the problem of the digital divide. The case of students from disadvantaged communities in developing and underdeveloped countries is much worse. They are falling back in terms of academic excellence and also socio-economic progress. While in post-COVID, you see the online remote learning introduced by states as an emergency response was not successful. It was intended to reach all students but failed drastically. In your own lectures, you see out of 50 students, only 10, 15, 20 maximum are participating. However, researchers throughout the world were engulfed in the problem and attempted to find a better solution. The necessity to find out an alternative mechanism by staying within the only available online learning option, which was a major challenge before the scientists. The state authorities revisited their existing policy frameworks and also introduced new strategies in this continuing collaborative attempt to reimagine the traditional model of university and school-based learning. International organizations and other NGOs made their own interventions so as to tackle the crisis. UNESCO is doing a great job in this respect. UNESCO Future of Education initiative is catalyzing a global debate on how knowledge, education, and learning need to be reimagined. We are not talking of imagined community. We are talking now of the post-COVID, about the reimagined communities in a world of increasing complication, in the world of uncertainty, in the world of instability. So friends, UNESCO has established a global education coalition which encompasses 160 member nations so as to support countries, particularly vulnerable, disadvantaged communities, in their effort to mitigate the impact of the university closure, impact of the school closures. Research reports of international agencies like Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, World Bank, UNICEF, are also providing the government's appropriate recommendations. Friends, some scholars propose the model of education that has to be observed after the pandemic. Two of the leading experts on education, Emiliana Vegas and Rebecca Winthrop, they have argued that there is an opportunity to leapfrog towards powered up schools. According to them, a powered up school could be one that put up a strong public school at the center of the community and leverages the most effective partnership, including those that have emerged during the COVID-19, so as to help learners grow and develop a broad range of competencies, skills in and out of school. While some others argue for hybrid school coming, or hybrid homeschooling, or hybrid learning. And hybrid learning is very important. This was also a point which was highlighted by Mustajib Saab. Some of these aspects that combine the best part of face-to-face and online learning. So this entirely practical and theoretical development raises a central question of whether the system of education evolving with the COVID-19 pandemic can emerge as a stronger than it was before. Or is it the arrival of pandemic and the subsequent lockdown a blessing in disguise in the field of education? So it is a reality that closure of educational institutions helped the countries to familiarize a major chunk of population with modern technologies and an online system of education, though it is very challenging, and how this traditionally based society is going to transform the educational sector throughout the world is evolving to ensure quality, to ensure resilience, and is being equipped to deal with a possible emergency in the future. With this, I stop my presentation, friends. I thank you all for your patience for learning and also a process of joining this webinar. And also I thank everyone for listening me patiently. Please, if you have any question, please ask. I will be very grateful. And thanks all of you for your involvement and participation.
मॅडम सूचना द्या लोकांना. माईक आवाज येत नाही.
Am I audible now, sir? Hello. All the participants are requested to ask any queries on this session. I think there is no query about online education. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Naved Jamal, sir, for enlightening us on post-COVID-19 pandemic. He has explained origin of coronavirus and struggling countries in all over the world. Virtual mode of learning started due to COVID-19. He also expressed those who are fit and fine will sustain in online mode of teaching learning process. Online classes become the necessity of time in pandemic. He elaborated the challenges before education field. Thank you, sir. Then I would like to request Dr. Vasant Sanup, sir, to deliver presidential address of today's e-conference. Dr. Vasant Sanup, sir.
सर बहुतेक नाही मॅडम.
Dr. Vasant Sanup, sir, is not there.
Sanup sir join होता है.
Okay, sir. Dr. Siddiqui, sir.
कुठून यायला ते कॉन्फरन्स मध्ये. हा हा तोपर्यंत ऐका ना, तोपर्यंत काहीतरी घ्या ना याच्यावर.
नाम तो बता रहा नहीं यार, तो आए बोल रहे हो आप. आ गए नहीं क्या?
मॅडम मी रिक्वेस्ट करा सर.
Joining Dr. Vasant Sanup, sir, Principal of Balbim College, Bid, will deliver presidential address of today's e-conference. I would like to invite Dr. Vasant Sanup, sir.
आजच्या या आंतरराष्ट्रीय कॉन्फरन्सच्या निमित्ताने बडी महाविद्यालयाचे प्राचार्य डॉक्टर विश्वास कदम, सरस्वती महाविद्यालयाचे प्राचार्य श्री पाटील आणि सातत्याने गेल्या 3-4 दिवसापासून या कॉन्फरन्सच्या तयारीमध्ये असणारे सर्व दोन्ही महाविद्यालयाचे माझे प्राध्यापक, सहकारी मित्र आणि रिसोर्स पर्सन, खास करून अमेरिकेमधून ज्यांनी आपलं सकाळी बीज भाषण दिलं ते अमितजी, आणि जामा मिलिया विद्यापीठ चे राज्यशास्त्राचे प्राध्यापक मित्र आणि इतर सर्व सहभागी प्राध्यापक मित्रांनो, एकूण ही जी चर्चा झालेली आहे या चर्चेच्या अनुषंगाने आपल्याला इतकंच म्हणता येईल की कोविडच्या नंतर उच्च शिक्षणामध्ये ही एक इष्टापती होती का? मुळामध्ये आपण सर्व हायर एज्युकेशन मधले सर्व स्टेक होल्डर, खास करून टीचिंग लर्निंग प्रोसेस मध्ये असणारे घटक, विद्यार्थी आणि प्राध्यापक आणि हायर एज्युकेशनच्या संस्था, मग ती स्टेट युनिव्हर्सिटी असतील, खाजगी विद्यापीठ असतील, मग हे सर्वच बेसावध होते. बेसावधपणे कोविडने गाठलेलं आहे आणि शिक्षणासारखा अत्यंत महत्वाचा जो विषय आहे यामध्ये नेमकी आपली आता भूमिका काय राहील? तर आपण सुरुवातीला चाट पडलो. मला असं वाटतं की आजपर्यंत आम्हाला केवळ ऑफलाईन वर्गातलं टीचिंग लर्निंग बद्दल अत्यंत प्रभावीपणे पिढ्या तयार केलेल्या आहेत आणि आज भारतामध्ये किंवा जगभरात या वर्गखोल्यातल्या शिक्षणामधून उच्च शिक्षणाच्या माध्यमातून एक स्वातंत्र्यानंतर ही जी सुरुवात झालेली आहे त्यातून आपण जे मोठमोठी प्रतिष्ठानं आणि संस्था उभ्या केल्या, IIT सारख्या असतील, विद्यापीठ असतील, विज्ञान तंत्रज्ञानामध्ये केलेली प्रगती असेल, दळणवळणामध्ये केली असेल, सेवा क्षेत्रामध्ये केलेली असेल, एकूण कल्याणकारी राज्याची भूमिका म्हणून काय भूमिका पार पडली असेल, तर यामध्ये प्रामुख्याने या उच्च शिक्षणाचा फार मोठा मूलभूत सहभाग होता. यामुळे वर्गखोल्यातल्या शिक्षणाचं महत्व जगभरात काल परवापर्यंत काय होतं, पण या घडीला मात्र अचानकपणे बेसावधपणे कोरोनाने गाठल्यामुळे शिक्षणामध्ये खंड पडू नये म्हणून या अलीकडच्या काळात किमान नॅकच्या माध्यमातून भारताच्या हद्दीपर्यंत जरी विचार केला तर नॅकची अशी भूमिका होती की प्रत्येक प्राध्यापकाला ICT मध्ये गती असावी. त्यांनी ICTच्या माध्यमातून ज्ञानाचं डिसिमिनेशन करावं. टीचिंग लर्निंग प्रोसेस साठी हा अत्यंत प्रभावी घटक आहे आणि काही विषयांच्या बाबतीत हे निश्चितपणे ICT जे आहे ते प्रभावी ठरले. तसं इंजिनिअरिंग मध्ये काय एखादी मशीन काय वर्गामध्ये आणून दाखवता येत नाही. त्याऐवजी जर आपण ICTच्या माध्यमातून जर टीचिंग लर्निंग केली तर ह्या सगळ्या गोष्टी अगदी सुलभपणे विद्यार्थ्यासमोर आणता येतात किंवा मेडिकल सायन्स मध्ये. पण या काही गोष्टी एका मर्यादेपर्यंत यशस्वी झालेल्या आहेत. परंतु सर्वच विषयांच्या बाबतीत जिथे विज्ञान तंत्रज्ञानाचा वापर आपल्याला जरूर करावा लागेल किंवा आपण केला या कालखंडामध्ये की ऑफलाईनही आपण एज्युकेशन दिलं, ऑनलाईनही दिलं. याला आपण आता अलीकडे हायब्रिड शिक्षण पद्धती असं नाव दिलेलं आहे. तर या हायब्रिड मधून एक आम्ही जे नॅकच्या माध्यमातून आमचे टीचर आठवड्यातून एक तरी तास जे असे वेळापत्रक तयार करतो, यासाठी आपल्याला आता एकाएकी असा धक्का बसला की आता ऑनलाईन शिवाय पर्याय नाही. म्हणून प्रत्येक प्राध्यापक याबद्दलची साक्षरता करून घेऊन आणि या संदर्भातली जी काही ज्ञानाची उपलब्धता आहे, तंत्रशास्त्र जे उपलब्ध आहे, हे हाताशी घेऊन अगदी मी तर असं म्हणेल की अत्यंत यशस्वीपणे आम्ही विद्यार्थी आमच्यापासून सामाजिक दृष्ट्या, सांस्कृतिक दृष्ट्या, भौगोलिक दृष्ट्या वेगवेगळ्या प्रदेशामध्ये होतो. जागतिक पातळीवर जर विचार केला तर हा विद्यार्थी जे बाहेर शिक्षणासाठी गेलेले होते ते त्यांच्या देशामध्ये परतले, त्यांचे लेक्चर जेव्हा झाले तर जगभर जेव्हा एखाद्या विद्यापीठाचे विद्यार्थी त्या कोविडमुळे घरी आलेले होते आपल्या देशात आणि आपल्या देशांतर्गत आपापल्या गावी आलेले होते, हे त्यांचा एकूण सांस्कृतिक, भौगोलिक हे सगळं इकॉलॉजी वेगळी होती. या इकॉलॉजी पर्यंत आपण एकदाच पोहोचलो ही निश्चितपणे आपली उपलब्धी आहे. म्हणून या ठिकाणी असं नमूद करावं लागेल की आपण काही का होईना विद्यार्थ्याच्या हिताच्या दृष्टिकोनातून परीक्षा घेतल्या, निकालही लागले, परंतु त्यामध्ये फार मोठी मर्यादा होती की आपल्या प्रश्नपत्रिकेचं स्वरूप बदलावं लागलं, ऑब्जेक्टिव्ह टाईप कडे यावं लागलं. यामुळे एक आपला मोठा तोटा झाला की ज्या आपल्या आजच्या कोविड नंतरच्या अकॅडमिक वर काय परिणाम झाला, त्याच्या लिमिटेशन्स काय आहेत. तर अनालिटिकल नॉलेज आणि डेप्थ ऑफ नॉलेजला आपल्याला फाटा द्यावा लागला. आणि दुसरी अत्यंत यामधली आपला दोष जो आहे तो पियर लर्निंग जी आहे, पियर लर्निंग, की आपण एकत्र बसून टीचर शिकवतो, टीचरला शंका विचारत येतात, केवळ टीचरवर आपण अवलंबून राहत नाही तर विद्यार्थी आपल्या गटागटाने चर्चा करतात. तर याही बाबतीत आपण विद्यार्थ्याचे केवळ शिक्षण नव्हे तर इतर जे काही त्याचे सुप्त गुण आहेत, शैक्षणिक उपक्रम शिवाय शिक्षणेतर जे उपक्रम आहेत की ज्यामुळे माणूस तयार होतो. तंत्रज्ञान किती जरी विकसित केलं तर मानवी चेहरा जो आहे तो आपण गमावता कामा नये. तो जर गमावला तर आज आय टी क्षेत्रामध्ये जे काही सोशल प्रॉब्लेम क्रिएट झालेले आहेत, हे प्रॉब्लेम केवळ त्यांना सोशल एज्युकेशन नाही, त्याचं सामाजिकरण होत नाही, सांस्कृतिक भरण पोषण होत नाही, त्यांच्या सर्व अंगाचा विकास होत नाही. मग ते फार मोठ्या प्रमाणामध्ये ताणतणावामध्ये येतात. पण हे जर तुम्हाला संगीताची आवड असेल, वाचनाची आवड असेल, कथा कादंबऱ्या वाचण्याची आवड असेल तर तिकडे मन गुंतून आपण एकूण समाजापासून तुटलेपणाची जी भावना आहे, अलिनेशन ज्याला आपण म्हणतो, त्यापासून परात्म भाव जो आहे तो परात्म भाव या ठिकाणी निर्माण झालेला आहे. तर हा परात्म भाव ही एक फार मोठी आपली मर्यादा झाली या कालखंडामध्ये आणि पुढेही मला वाटतं हा परात्म भाव हा एक फार मोठा धोका यामध्ये आहे. याशिवाय आता केवळ कारखान्यामध्ये जशी एखाद्या वस्तूचं उत्पादन होतं आणि ते साचेबंद असतं आणि साचेबंद ती वस्तू बाहेर पडते, तसं आपल्याला विद्यार्थी हा यंत्रासारखा साचेबंदपणे त्या ठिकाणी आणता येणार नाही, निर्माण होत नसतो. म्हणून मला या ठिकाणी असं म्हणायचं की अजून काही दिवस भारतासारख्या राज्यामध्ये जिथे शिक्षणाची आता सुरुवात झालेली आहे, उच्च शिक्षणाचं प्रमाण जे आहे ते आपल्या 50% न्यायचं आहे किंवा त्याही पुढे जायचं आहे. तर ते नेत असताना अजून आपण समाजातले फार मोठे घटक हे हायर एज्युकेशन मध्ये येणं बाकी आहे. काही घटक प्राथमिक शिक्षणापासूनच वंचित आहे. तर अशा वेळेला आमच्याकडे ह्या तंत्रज्ञानाच्या माध्यमा व्यतिरिक्त हे जे वर्ग खोल्याचं जे माध्यम आहे, ग्रंथालयाचं जे माध्यम आहे, शिक्षक हा प्रत्यक्ष जीवनपणे जो वर्ग शिकवतो याचं हे जे माध्यम आहे. आणि आता आपण पाहिलेलं आहे की सगळी लहान मुलं जी आहेत या मधल्या काळामध्ये प्रचंड वैतागलेली आहे आणि ऑनलाईन एज्युकेशन मध्ये मुलांनी या मोबाईलचा तटस्थपणे ही ज्ञानाची शाखा असल्यामुळे त्यांनी कसा त्याचा गैरवापर केला हे आपल्या लक्षात आलेलं आहे. म्हणून मी इतकंच म्हणेल या ठिकाणी की ही जरी एज आता आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजन्स जरी असलं तर तेही बरोबर घेऊन आपल्याला ऑफ एज्युकेशन आणि ऑनलाईन एज्युकेशन, आता यातला सगळ्यात मोठा धोका आता युजीसीने ठरवलं की 40% जे आहे ते ऑनलाईन एज्युकेशन द्यायचं, तर आहे त्या लोकांना घरी जावं. तर या बाबतीत आपण जर ग्रॅड्युअली जर याबद्दल पावलं टाकली. निश्चितपणे फायदा होईल. पण आपण या प्रसंगी मला इतकंच म्हणायचं आहे की करोनाच्या माध्यमातून आपल्याला बरंच काही शिकता आलं आणि तंत्रज्ञानाच्या बाबतीत आपण जी काही एकाएकी झेप घेतलेली आहे ती पुन्हा सातत्याने पुढे ठेवूया. आणि या काळामध्ये मोठ्या प्रमाणात वेबिनार वगैरे आयोजित झाले म्हणून फार मोठा एक खर्च वाचला कॉन्फरन्स सेमिनारचा. आणि मनुष्यबळे ते जी काही सायकोलॉजिकली फिजिकली त्याला कॉस्ट मोजायला होती प्रवासाची तीही या ठिकाणी कमी झालेली आहे. तर हे तंत्रज्ञान या बाबतीत आपण जर मर्यादित ठेवलं आणि वर्ग खोल्यात पण शिक्षण कायम ठेवलं तर निश्चितपणे त्याचा फायदा होईल. तर मला वाटतं या प्रसंगी मी आता अधिक बोलत नाही तर मला या ठिकाणी अध्यक्षीय स्थान दिलं त्याबद्दल आम्ही या संयोजकाचे आभार मानतो आणि या ठिकाणी थांबतो. धन्यवाद.
Thank you, Principal Dr. Sanap sir, for delivering presidential address of this e-conference on post-COVID-19 changes in academic field, merits and demerits. Dr. Sanap sir opined upon the created how offline education created successful generations, and he also explained the concept of hybrid education. Thank you, sir. Now, may I request Mrs. Rakte Madam to express vote of thanks.
I am audible, sir.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and especially good night, Dr. Amit Rahul, sir. I would like to express my gratitude towards the dignitaries and all the online audience in this one-day international conference on post-COVID-19 changes in the academic field, merits and demerits. The event is jointly organized by IPSC Department of Jai Bhavani Shikshan Prasarak Mandal, Arts and Science College, Shivaji Nagar Gadhi, and Saraswati Mahavidyalaya, Kaij, District B. First of all, I would like to thank our patron and President of Jai Bhavani Shikshan Prasarak Mandal Geurai, Honorable Sri Amar Singh Ji Pandit Saheb, for providing valuable inspiration for organizing such an educational program. And I would like to thank the President of Mauli Vidyapit Kaij, Honorable Sri Ashok Ravji Patil Saheb. I would like to thank the today's inaugurator, Principal Dr. Vishwas Kadam Sir, Arts and Science College, Shivaji Nagar Gadhi, for giving us his valuable time and guidance. I would like to thank the President of the e-conference, Dr. Vasant Sanap Sir, for giving a very useful information and knowledge for the participants. I would like to thank the chief guest, Dr. Amit Rahul Sir, for taking out time from his busy schedule to grace the event. Thank you, sir, for inspiring and encouraging us with your words on this special day that is a National Education Day. I would like to thank the resource person, Dr. Mustajib Khan Sir, Professor, Department of English, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University, Aurangabad. I would like to thank another resource person, Dr. Naved Jamel Sir, Professor, Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia, Central University, New Delhi, for making an excellent presentation and making this international e-conference meaningful and interesting. I would like to thank Principal Dr. Patil GB Sir, Saraswati Mahavidyalaya, Kaij, District B. I would like to thank all the online participants and technical support provided by Dr. Rahul Deshmukh Sir. I would like to thank the anchor of the e-conference, Dr. Vaishali Ahir Madam. I would like to thank the e-conference organizers, Dr. Siddiqui Sir, Coordinator, IQAC and whole IQAC team. I would like to thank Mr. Ramrule sir and team for working hard for the past few days to make this webinar successful. I would like to thank my college staff for helping us in this event. Last but not the least, I would like to thank non-teaching staff for their support. Thank you everyone once again for making it a great success. Finally, on behalf of the organizers of the one-day international e-conference, I would like to declare the event as ended. Thank you.